This is how podcasts go. You like fuck up, and then you just do it again. Coming to you from downtown Vancouver at Jaegers on the West Coast, this is Politicoast. Today is August 31st, 2017, and this is our 50th episode, our live show. Politicoast, the podcast, explores what's happening in British Columbia and across the country. You're probably already subscribed, and like 3 of you have left a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever else. That's fine. But if you haven't already, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at PoliticosPod. And how many of you are Patreon supporters? 1, 2, 3, 4. When you're on a podcast, no one can see you. But 4 people. Here, you're awesome. The rest of you, I know you will be soon when you have better jobs.
I'm Scott.
I'm Ian. Thank you all for coming tonight. Like I said before I hit the record buttons, we're going to have 2 main parts to tonight. We're going to have our first interview with David Moscrop, political scientist, who I've been describing as sassy political scientist. And then we're going to do a second segment with competitors from Pod Keep Our Land. First up, Dave, who are you?
Oh, man.
Deep questions to start.
Who starts with the existential question?
Why are you here?
Why am I here? Why? Yeah, it makes me think of Camus. You know, Camus, who was an existentialist, died in a I think we can do this later. But he died in I think it was a car accident or maybe a motorcycle accident. Does someone know? And there was a question whether or not he killed himself because he was an existentialist, and that debate has raged for years. Anyways, what was your question?
What's your bona fides?
I have a PhD in political science. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Simon Fraser University, hell of an institution. And I'm a
Unlike that
writer.
shit UBC
Well, no,
place
that's
that
where
you just graduated.
that's where I got my PhD, so it's good too. And so I'm a political theorist by training, and I study the psychology of political decision making in democracies. And I'm a writer for Maclean's magazine, also hell of a publication. And I'm writing a book on why we make bad political decisions and how we can make better ones. And that's more or less it.
So
I'm a tender lover. Jesus. Just tell me when to stop.
Maclean's this past week, you had an article about jam.
I did.
Tell us about John A MacDonald and why he deserves to be erased from history.
Yes, almost. Yes, almost as if we should carry out. No, not gonna make that joke. I get enough correspondence, let's say, as it is, without having to make. Anyway, so yeah, look. So this debate erupted when the elementary teachers of Ontario decided they were going to pass a resolution that said we should remove John A MacDonald from schools. Turns out, by the way, someone had a look. There's like 11 schools named after John A MacDonald in Canada. But this big national debate erupted over it. And the nation's older whites came out in defense of John A MacDonald and suggested that it was absolutely sacrilege to remove him. It would be erasing history if you did this. And then there were some other folks and younger people, people of color, Indigenous people, who pushed back and said, actually, no, there's a good argument to remove him. So I wrote it because I was on the train to Portland and I was bitching to my girlfriend about how this was ridiculous and someone needed to say something, and she started like rolling her eyes and like trying to do her work. So I thought, okay, well, so she doesn't want to listen to me anymore, so I'm going to make the rest of the country listen instead. So I thought I'm going to write this piece. So my argument was, look, history. If you conceive of history as a static thing and a sort of a record of facts, then okay, fine. Then you want to say, well, we want to keep John A. MacDonald because this is a record of this guy who existed. But that's a stupid way to think of history, and it's lazy and it's ignorant and useless. If you think of history as a thing that's ongoing, that's still doing work today, that doesn't just connect the past to the present and prepare us for the future, but actually does work in the moment of projecting, of honoring some, of deciding who we're going to celebrate publicly. It's completely legitimate for a society to say, you know what, maybe we don't want to name schools after someone who was complicit in the murder of countless Indigenous folks and the setting up of a system that continues to do violence to Indigenous Canadians. So I made that point, which I thought was just obvious, and sort of said this piece got taken out of the piece, but I said, it would be like the Congolese might not want to name schools after Leopold II. And if if you don't know what that references to, that's fine. Look it up, because I think there's a parallel here. And anyway, so I thought that was obvious. And then someone on Twitter, the Twitter backlash wasn't as bad as I thought it'd be, because people can be assholes on people can be assholes in real life, but on Twitter they're like hyper assholes. I thought it was mostly fine, but. Someone on Twitter said, if you think of history as a pros and cons list, then you could see why someone might want to back John A. MacDonald being on schools. But if you think of history in a way that it's not just a pros and cons list, then there's good reasons to remove him. So the debate, I think, is going to continue to rage on. This is not the end of this. This is the beginning, I think, of a shift in historical consciousness where we're going to start to call this stuff out. It's happening in the United States with Confederate memorials. And I think it's an important thing to have. And I do think in the long run, the right side of history is going to be revisiting this stuff. And by the way, quickly to address the stupidest counterpoint, and shame on you if you've been making this, we don't want to hold John A. MacDonald to 2017 standards. I mean, are you fucking kidding me? It's like, my response is like, you don't want to hold Nero to 2017 standards, right? I mean, the standards change, then we decide who we want to honor and celebrate publicly accordingly. And I think, as Canadians, we should, buck up and start to rethink it ourselves. Not to put too fine a point on it.
So John A. MacDonald obviously has done some not great stuff, to put it mildly.
Yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah. But at the same time, he was one of the architects of Canada, had a big role in Confederation, first Prime Minister. So where exactly would you put the point at which we should celebrate those accomplishments, and where does that kind of fit into the overall picture?
Right. So, part of the argument was, taking his name off of schools was a very specific thing. It was saying he was complicit in the creation of the residential school system. Naming schools after him, which are attended by, among other folks, Indigenous peoples, it's reasonable to say we don't want schools named after him. I'm not saying he should be stricken from the record books as if he never existed. We're not burning down the Library of Alexandria here. We're saying we're not going to honor him specifically on schools. And I think it's reasonable to say, it's not a zero-sum thing. It's not, it's not a black or white thing. You can't say, well, we're going to name nothing after him. We're going to pretend he never happened. No, we're having a very specific debate about removing his name from schools, which I think is reasonable. And someone else might say, okay, fine, but we're going to leave him on the $10 note. I'm like, all right, fine. We can live with it. We can have a bit of a compromise. But, renaming those schools also gives us an opportunity to honor and celebrate and put focus on something else, perhaps more Indigenous history. Because as it is now in Canada, we're pretty bad at it, other than sort of like sundry plaques scattered across. Nobody reads plaques, do they? Does anybody read
I do.
But we're very biased.
Yeah, this is a very particular audience. This is a plaque reading audience. I don't read plaques because I have other things. I'm looking at my phone.
Bullshit.
I'm looking at my phone. I'm playing Bejeweled and Threes on my phone like every other millennial. I'm not looking at plaques. And so, I'm very wary of the argument that this is a slippery slope, that if we take John A. MacDonald's name off 11 schools, then we're going to forget who he was, as if 30 years from now, people are going to be in class saying, then there was that guy, he founded Canada, he set himself on fire one time, Jim? Was it Jim? Something
we'll
like
have
that?
to rename Charles Tupper Elementary here in Vancouver.
What did he do?
He was the shortest prime minister in Canada, not in terms of height, but in terms of serve. He did 60 days, yeah. 58 days in office. He didn't die in office, so he was one of the 4 prime ministers who served in the final term of John A. MacDonald after Jam died.
Who was corrupt as all hell, by the way.
Oh yeah, but after Jam died, there was a series of prime ministers to serve out his last term as prime minister, and I think 3 of the 4 shortest prime ministers were in that period, because one quit, another died, another got sick, and Charles Tupper had the last 58 days before an election, which he bombed because he was living off the legacy of corrupt John A.
So you read that on a plaque, right? Who was the guy who died in the soup? Who was the guy who died in the soup? Mackenzie, Abbott, Thompson, Tupper, Bull. Abbott, Thompson? Was it Thompson that died in the soup in England?
This is the most Canadian history. We had no assassinations. We had people die in their soup.
Yeah, plunged into his soup when he was in the UK. Yes, but I mean, look, again, going back to the pros and cons thing, I mean, history isn't a pros and cons list. It's okay to bring this stuff to the surface and to say that there's just some things we're going to give up in exchange for something else. And I don't think it means we're going to forget history. As someone said again on Twitter, this is my only reference point right now. In reference to the U.S. and removing Confederate monuments, it's like, the people who are terrified that we're going to forget history because we're taking down these Confederate monuments are going to be shocked to learn that there's this thing called books. It's full of all kinds of words that reference history, and you can look stuff up there. And I think that's true of John A. MacDonald. And I mean, again, I don't want to make this an ad hominem thing, so this is just an observation. If you look at the demographics of those who were supporting John A. MacDonald versus those who wanted to remove him, there is a very particular demographic divide. And when I made the joke earlier that the nation's older whites were the ones who were supporting MacDonald, I was getting at something that was real. I think there's a generational shift that exists to some extent, at least to the chattering classes, and I think that's worth noting. And look, we have every right as a new generation to decide who we want to venerate. Right? And but I'll leave it on this final point. It isn't one of the critiques was we're rewriting history, but that's always what we're doing. History is always rewriting history because we're always deciding who we want to venerate, who we want to acknowledge, what's good, what's bad, how we should conceive of it, and how we should process it. That's all history ever is. It's not a static thing. It's a lazy and useless way to think of it otherwise. But anyways, I'm open to entertaining counterpoints, but I think they're wrong.
So the first thing I'll bring up is Angus Reid this week released a poll on this question because someone had to.
Yeah, sure.
Someone had to ask Canadians actually what they thought. They did 1,500 people. And Angus Reid's a good pollster. I find their interpretations of polls can be a bit leaning to one side because
Which
Angus...
side? Which side?
Well, do you know Angus Reid himself or of
I've
his
never
sort of
met
story?
him.
So he's
I've heard
a sort of very devout Catholic on the sort of
Me too.
anti-choice. I'm learning so much.
I used to be a Catholic.
Yeah, that's most of Canadians. But
My confirmation name is George.
Angus Reid is
killed a
still.
dragon.
He's described himself as anti-choice and sort of worried about the direction of this country. And so I always take the press releases they put out with a grain of salt. But the data he does, I find, is good. They surveyed 1,500 people, a reasonable amount. They found 55% opposed the renaming of schools. 25% did support it, though, which I actually thought was a little bit higher than expected. 19%, like always, can't decide. You think 55% opposed to you is enough to sort of convince you? The majority is against you, Dave.
I mean, look.
I mean, tyranny
Not
of
to
the
be
majority.
cliched. I mean, if you had polled on slavery in the mid-19th century America, I'm sure you would have found 55% of people who were fine with keeping slaves. I mean, when it comes to these things, we don't really do a head count. We have certain things that we consider more important than a head count, and I think this is one of those things. I mean, I agree that 25% actually seems kind of high in terms of renaming John A. MacDonald. So here's a tricky thing about democracy, aside from sometimes it doesn't work very well. You have to constantly, if you have a good democracy, I think, what you have is this is from Habermas, and I'm going to summarize Habermas very bravely here very quickly, because he's awful to read, but brilliant. So you want like a public sphere where all of us live, and we have these informal arrangements and civil society stuff's going on, and we're discussing and generating preferences, and it's all really good. And then you have a formal sphere where political decisions are made. And in a good democracy, you have a kind of porous border between the public sphere and the formal decision-making sphere, and you want that stuff to kind of carry over across the border so that the stuff that people want gets turned into policy and law and the values of the society and whatever. But sometimes, because you don't want too much populism or a tyranny of the majority, you need the folks who are running the show to lead by saying, you know what, we disagree with the majority, we're going to push or pull you in a particular way because we think there's something fundamentally good. And that's how you get rights wins. And if you look at the history of rights advancements in Canada, for instance, you see the courts doing a lot of that work because politicians are chicken shit in a lot of cases, right? They don't want to do it. So they'll have a Supreme Court reference, or the courts will come in and say, man, that's some bullshit. You got to fix that because it's racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever it might be. And we saw that with same-sex marriage, in around 2003, 2004, with the same-sex thing. There was legislation, but that was after court cases that said, are you fucking kidding me? Of course marriage. We need marriage equality in Canada. And you know what happened afterwards? Public opinion followed. There's a great piece by J. Scott Matthews. Anyone? I'm looking around the room. I think it's Scott Matthews. If I'm wrong, I'll correct this in the show notes, which is the thing.
we have a thing. No one reads them. Don't worry
well,
about
you
it.
should read them.
But I spent a lot of time on them.
Yeah, but they're great. So read the guy's show notes, for God's sakes.
It's
Like footnotes in academic work.
Yeah.
You spend so much time making sure your footnotes are good, and everyone just reads the abstracts and cites it so that they look like they're current. Anyway, I don't do that, but everyone else does. So I'm a very good scholar. Anyway, so what happened with the same-sex marriage thing was public opinion followed. There was a reframing of same-sex marriage as equal rights, not special rights, and then public opinion moved. And that's sort of how sometimes to get progress, you need leaders to lead, even though maybe 55% of people are on the other end of things. So, anyway.
So the courts are probably not going to come down and say, that's some bullshit on what we've named our schools.
You don't know Beverly McLaughlin?
Well, she's
retiring.
Yeah, that's too bad.
She's
I
got,
really
what,
like her.
30 days left?
Yeah, I really like her.
The court system doesn't move that fast.
Her and Cromwell gone in the same little period of time. He was great too. What a great name for a justice, by the way, Cromwell. Anyway.
And Kathleen Wynne's already said, don't really think it's appropriate to rename it, or we're not going to be doing that now. Where do you think this is going to go? If you were to put money down, are we going to go to 10 schools? 9 schools?
I mean, maybe you get a community or two who renames the school. But I think the important thing is we've started the debate, we're having the debate, it's on the register of what's a legitimate thing to talk about and think about. And maybe what happens is when you start to name things going forward, you think, John A. MacDonald, right, Indigenous, genocide, residential school system, not super cool. Okay, how about we name it something else? Maybe we'll look at a little more Tecumseh. By the way, if we're honoring people, I would kind of rather honor Tecumseh compared to John A. MacDonald. But anyway, you can look up the War of 1812 and see why Tecumseh is better than MacDonald. But you can make up your own mind. You're an adult, presumably. And if you're not, go to bed. You're probably too young to be listening to this.
Or sitting in a pub drinking.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people here who are drinking a lot, not including myself. But I mean, I do think it puts on the register alternatives that, part of moving forward as a society is just being able to think new thoughts that just we wouldn't think before, or do things that you wouldn't be able to do before. And I think just having this debate alters the register of what's legitimate. So I think it's a win even if we don't get a school renamed, because in the future I think we're going to really consider naming things something other than, do we really need more things named after old dead white dudes? Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So I'll bring this back to the Angus Reid poll, because there is a bit more interesting stuff when you get into the weeds of it. It doesn't, I'm sure if I dug into the cross tables, I might be able to find the age demographics to prove you right on what you said earlier about old men liking this way more.
That would be awesome.
But it obviously says right in the headlines, conservatives very in favor of keeping Jam's name on stuff.
Shocker.
NDP kind of split, still on the let's not change things, because the status quo has a pretty good bias. One question they asked is about statues that are named after things, and they said, do you agree or disagree with the idea that these statues would be better placed in museums where they are able to be viewed with the proper historical context? I guess the Indiana Jones, it belongs in a museum kind of approach, and 71% agree with that. Let's put statues in museums.
That sounds like a push-pull question to me.
Is a weird kind of framing,
yeah.
Are we just going to put all of our statues in museums now? I like this idea of let's have proper context, but then our public squares get very boring if there aren't statues there. But I guess we could have better things. Mm-hmm. I mean, the one thing I've heard that's really nice, I lived in London for 18 months, and right outside in Trafalgar Square, the fourth plinth is now just a rotating art sculpture exhibit. And the nice thing about having it rotating is when you realize that person made a racist piece of art, it's going to be gone soon. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to do that again. We can get a better art and keep evolving and highlight new artists. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's
and
cool.
That 71%, it belongs in a museum. I guess just the way the question's phrased, no one disagrees with it really. Well, apparently 29% do, but 29% of Canadians are apparently wrong about everything.
Well, that's, by the way, that's universally true of everything. I mean, it's worth noting that when it comes to polls, there's always going to be a certain percentage of people who are just nuts.
It's the lizard quotient.
This is worth noting when you do, any sort of political psychology or opinion or whatever. There's always going to be a percentage of people who are just like, I cannot believe that they think this way. I mean, there's always. Pardon me. Can I get another beer, please? I'm Dave. And it's a Fat Tug, which is a fine beer.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'll keep this in if they sponsor us.
Yeah.
But otherwise.
So that's a good part. Don't take that part out. But I mean, it's worth. I know we always sort of say we're always shocked when we learn that X percentage of people think something that we think that ought to not be thought, right? But that always exists. There's always going to be a certain percentage of the population who are just so far gone that you can't even imagine. And they get empowered when this sort of stuff comes out.
The one question they asked that got a majority, before I move on to the second half of, this topic, was government should have an independent committee in place to consider formal proposals for the renaming of monument schools and others. 55% of people in Manitoba and Saskatchewan are only in support of that. It means 45% of people in the prairies and, 41% of people in Alberta are like, no, there should just, once we name something, it's in stone.
Yeah.
Never change it.
Yeah,
which I know I grew up in Alberta, so fair enough. But.
No, I went to Caligula Junior High.
Jesus.
And I will never. No, I mean, like, come on, for the love of God. Like a good number of Canadians who love the idea of an independent. Whenever people hear vis-a-vis government independent, they love it because it's not going to be partisan. It's going to be this independent commission, as if these things are somehow completely removed from any consideration that isn't absolutely pure and platonic. There's some people love about that. But they have no idea what it actually is. But I mean, I'll be quick on this. This is an important thing. We as a society get to decide together what we decide ought to be honored, what to be highlighted, what to be celebrated. And that's a debate that needs to happen in the broader population, and then it's eventually going to filter down into outcomes. And I think that's great. By the way, you should also name more things after Agnes MacPhail, who, if you get a chance, you should really look up, because she's fantastic. We got one MacPhailian in here. Absolutely remarkable historical story there, and a remarkable woman, and she should be on the money, by the way. It's a crime that she isn't. Maybe we should take MacDonald off the 10.
Was briefly.
Was she?
She was on the 50.
On the 50.
Yeah.
Really? Oh, that's right. Yeah, right.
So the other thing they finally ask about is the Cornwallis statue in Halifax, which was recent controversy. Apparently 41% of Canadians do actually support removing that statue.
41% of the Canadians know who that is.
Well, they support removing it versus 36% are opposed to removing it.
I'm guessing that 47 was it?
41.
41 basically found out on Canada Day that statue existed and who it was for.
But this statue was again in the news today as the Proud Boys, the people who decided to.
McGuinness's organization, right?
Yeah, Gavin McGuinness. So Proud Boys, Gavin McGuinness, former vice founder, now on Rebel, not on Rebel anymore actually because super racist. He founded this group called Proud Boys that's basically white supremacist group. 4 of their members were in Halifax sort of standing up for and defending this statue when there was an Indigenous group saying, hey, Cornwallis, who called for the scalps of local Indigenous people when he was founding the province of Nova Scotia and the cities there.
I don't think it was just called for. I believe there was a bounty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he put out a bounty for Indigenous scalps. So the 4 people turned out were military officers. They were suspended briefly.
Not officers.
And Scott's going to correct me on all of this.
That's right.
And I'm going to pass it over to him anyway. But today they returned to regular service but are on special treatment. Explain it to us. Why is this okay?
Yeah, so first thing is...
Shouldn't they be fired?
First off, they're not officers. They were non-commissioned members. So never actually saw what rank they were, but from looking at them, I'm guessing ordinary seaman, basically near the bottom of the enlisted ranks.
Yeah, that
they were
checks out.
seamen.
That doesn't surprise
Although I
me.
believe there's one person from the Army, but it's not really the key point here. But today, the commander of the maritime forces in Atlantic... Can't speak it. The Atlantic Forces commander announced that they had returned to regular service. but that they were put on council and probation. And for those of us who don't know how the military works and all their administrative stuff, basically that's the most serious thing that happens right before they're released. So this is, if they basically step out of line, they're gone. Their careers are effectively on hold. They can't be promoted or posted anywhere for this time. So it's the step short of actually just full out firing them.
But why not fire them? I mean, this was like this. If you read no, but if you read the description of the group under whose name they were marching on that day, it is effectively a white supremacist group, and they're not hiding it. You don't have to do a Straussian reading of the group description to get that. It's just there in neon. It was offensive and inappropriate. It was white supremacist. It was effectively embarrassment to the country and certainly to the armed forces. So can't you just fire them? Why put them on leave?
Well, it wasn't. So from what I believe it was Admiral Norman said, he didn't really care why they were there at all. It was clearly wrong. He didn't care what their rationale was, but that they'd shown remorse and that he didn't feel that necessarily removing them from the military was the best point going forward. Now, if they step out of line again, they will absolutely be gone. And I think this is a fairly reasonable compromise, assuming that remorse is genuine. And they're going to be on council and probation for a full year. They're going to be monitored throughout this whole point. And if I was the CEO, that probably would have been my recommendation too.
When I was
just releasing someone outright is something that very rarely happens.
Well, let's pivot and do a few minutes on the federal NDP leadership race. The membership numbers came out this week, and the NDP is now at the federal level up to 124,000 members, which is roughly where they were at when they had the post-Jack Layton membership race in 2012, I believe. Most of those members are, of course, here in BC and in Ontario, with 10,000 in Alberta, 10,000 in Manitoba, and then sort of a spattering across the country. Jagmeet Singh personally claims to have signed up 47,000 of those, so over a third, which gives him sort of the strongest path to first ballot victory. What do we think this means?
Well, I mean, if the numbers are accurate, and I think, there's some debate over whether the numbers are inflated, and maybe they're rounded up, let's say, but I do imagine he has a pretty commanding lead, especially since all the other campaigns very quickly said, yeah, we don't want to release our numbers because it's a campaign and we don't want to release any secret campaign information, which is, in this context, the translation is we don't have anywhere near as many as he does. I think the Nikki Ashton campaign said something like, we exceeded expectations, which was the sort of report card my friends used to get when they got a C instead of a D. Good for Johnny exceeded expectations.
You got the most improved player
He
award.
finished the test. He didn't yet. So I would imagine he has a pretty commanding lead. That's not surprising. I bet he has a ton of members. He brought a ton of energy to the race. He was something different, and also I think of the whole slate of them, he was the rational continuation of the Layton Mulcair kind of approach to the NDP. And maybe the NDP wants to go back to the Alexa McDonough, Audrey McLaughlin days, or maybe they want to try to win. I don't know.
It does certainly feel like they want to go back to those days more than
Some of them do.
But I think it's also worth pointing out here that when the Conservatives were doing their leadership race, the current Conservative leader, Andrew Scheer, basically signed up no one, and he ended up coming out ahead on that one because he campaigned to the base, the people who were already members who were definitely going to show up to vote, and he let everyone else sign up the new members who, some of them voted, some of them didn't.
Yeah, obviously it matters who votes, not just who gets signed up. I guess one of the implication is if you sign people up, then you have a better chance that they're going to vote, and then there's a chance that they're going to vote for you. They're not beholden to you, but they're probably going to vote for you. So I still think he has the best shot of anybody. Maybe he's not a great second ballot candidate. I don't know. That's going to be hard to. It's hard to know. Maybe Charlie Angus is a good second ballot guy, or maybe Guy Caron was a good second ballot guy. Nikki Ashton probably isn't a great second ballot person. I would imagine she's not going to do great. I don't think she's a consensus candidate for anyone. She probably represents a certain percentage of the core of the party who wants to go back to the pure, unadulterated socialist principles that have kept the NDP way out of power for decades.
Or alternatively thinks the Bernie Sanders, Jeremy Corbyn kind of energy could work here. That's not to say
Charlie Angus. I think of Charlie Angus as the Bernie Sanders person in this campaign.
The problem is he didn't start that way. I think he's getting there.
Right.
I think he has the sort of charm to appeal to a populist bit, but he sort of started in the centrist in the like NDP, which is like center left instead of left.
Right.
And he's moved left. Like he just released a platform today about cooperative economy. And basically, if any time a private business shuts down, the worker should have the opportunity to convert it into a cooperative, which is a pretty socialistic thing that I saw a lot of people really cheering on. But
They already
it's not the Nikki Ashton, like, let's renationalize a whole bunch of shit because we can.
Yeah, although all workers can already buy the company, they put in offers.
It's giving them a pure right to do it.
But I think it's also worth pointing out here that Jeremy Corbyn and Bernie Sanders didn't actually win. They exceeded expectations, but Bernie Sanders isn't president or wasn't even the nominee, and Jeremy Corbyn might end up as prime minister, but that's far from certain.
I don't think he will. But also, first of all, Nikki Ashton, let's not pretend that our politics isn't sexist. And I think it's worth noting that that's a challenge that any woman in politics faces, and it's bullshit, but it's true. That said,
says the three men at the table.
Says the three white dudes.
We'll have a woman later.
Yeah.
They're so bad.
But although as three white dudes in politics, this is a perfectly representative sample of Canadian politics.
Or younger.
Which is white and which is a serious problem. This is my point, though. Is that's a serious problem, and I think. Anyways, but also Nikki Ashton introduces herself as an intersectional ecofeminist, and that's fine, and I respect that as a position. But how is it going to play in London, Ontario, or Red Deer, Alberta? I do think my point being that the NDP has a real decision to make right now, but whether or not they want to be pure or whether or not they're willing to compromise a bit to try to win. And this sort of attempt to paint Jagmeet Singh, for instance, as a liberal is indicative that there's a certain number of NDP folks who don't want to get anywhere away from ideological purity, which is fine if your goal as a party is to exist as a policy farm for the Liberals. But if you want to actually take a shot at winning, and Jack Layton recognized this, and Thomas Mulcair recognized this, and if he didn't have such a weird smile, we might be having a very different conversation right now.
Kept
the creepy uncle
reins
smile.
on him.
Like Uncle Tom just had an Ambien, just ready to go have a debate. We might be having a very different discussion right now, but that is the fundamental debate that they're having, and I think it is sort of like Nikki Ashton versus Jagmeet Singh, and then people like Guy Caron and Charlie Angus are in the middle. And is that everyone who's left? Is anyone else left?
That's all four.
That's all
Pat
four.
Stogren was in there
Pat
briefly,
Stogren.
which
The rebel
was
gorilla.
amazing, but sadly he stepped out.
We hardly knew you, Pat.
I'm still looking for who Peter Julian endorses, if anyone.
Does that matter, though?
Well, that's what I was also going to ask about
endorsed
endorsements.
someone.
So Alexa McDonough today or yesterday endorsed Guy Caron.
Yeah.
Morgane Oger, who's a super popular
Morgane's
candidate
great.
here in Vancouver, who almost became an MLA against Sam Sullivan, she endorsed Nikki Ashton. And there's a number of other high-profile endorsements that have gone every which way. A lot of BC people have endorsed Jagmeet Singh. Do endorsements matter?
I don't think so.
It's kind of a hint where kind of the movers and shakers of the party are, but overall, I don't think it matters a huge amount.
No,
Especially these days where social media and kind of the non-traditional forms of communication are much more prevalent. Back in the day where, that was the newspaper headline and that was the only information you got. Yeah, it probably mattered a little more, but these days, everyone makes up their own mind based off, tweets and everything.
Yeah, I don't think they matter. And maybe if Beyonce had endorsed somebody, or I don't know, who's in the news these days? Taylor Swift? Beyonce. but like she's
Drake.
She's on Drake. Taylor
need to have
Swift.
some Canadian
But I mean, I don't think
examples,
I don't think there's a lot of NDP voters at home thinking, I'm torn. I just like I'm gonna wait to see who Alexa McDonough supports, and then I'm gonna support whoever that is. I think there's a lot of NDP members at home these days thinking, who's Alexa McDonough? And Morgan's fantastic. I think she's the future of the BC NDP to some extent. But I don't think she is a heuristic either for people. I think we live in a sort of democratic environment in which people aren't going to be drawing on these heuristics anymore. They're going where the. Now that said, if these endorsements somehow play into the media and generate more and more buzz around those candidates, maybe that'll have a sort of knock-on effect, and people will say, "Oh yeah, everyone's paying attention to this person because they're in the media a lot. They're getting a lot of coverage," and there's a sort of almost like a name you recognize a lot or see a lot in the media makes you more likely to vote for that person, and that might have that kind of effect. But I don't think it's going to swing a race.
Yeah, about the only case I could really see where it would make a big difference is if it's someone in 4th or 10th place, or in the Conservatives' case, 13th place, and then a big name. If Stephen Harper endorsed
Human
Rick
thumb
Peterson,
Brad Strost.
Rick Peterson. Rick Peterson probably would have shot up from who to, I'll give that guy a look. But, in the case of the NDP, where it's 4 people, all of them are more or less equally well known, I don't see it swing thing one way
And they're
or the other.
also all getting some endorsements, some relatively high profile. I mean, also, the NDP is the only party where past leaders really endorse anyone. Like, Chrétien didn't endorse anyone. Stephen Harper didn't. They just they finish and they leave politics. And they're like, we are the statesmen, we sit in the back, whereas NDP leaders are still engaged in the bitter politics.
Yeah.
Probably because we haven't had national power.
It's true. And also
are still
watching the NDP do politics is sort of like watching student politics unfold.
the smaller the stakes, the more bitter it gets.
Yeah, it's like the whole civilization's gonna fall apart if Danny takes our poster down. and that to me seems like the whole. Anyways, the NDP's. The NDP's fine. Anyway, I have no problem with it. But you also get a ballot bump, for instance, at being at the top of a ballot and the bottom of a ballot. There's all kinds of weird stuff that contribute. And I rank endorsements somewhere along the effects of being at the top or the bottom of a ballot. If you can get it, fine. But does it make a difference? Not really. And again, going back to your example, Scheer, for instance, is a perfect example of that, right? And did Jagmeet Singh get any endorsements?
He's gotten a ton.
Has he?
So he's gotten a whole bunch of MLAs from BC. He's gotten
from the federal caucus?
Yeah, he's gotten a bunch of
most of BC. I pay no attention to endorsements because I don't
personally care. NDP MPs have endorsed Jagmeet Singh.
So there you go. So my interpretation of that would be that there is this sort of moving this is the guy who can win and we want to win. Right? So if you look at the NDP numbers, the membership numbers, you're probably looking and thinking, okay, well, there's some places where they're not particularly impressive. There's 141 new memberships in PEI. That's not great. I know there's only 700 people in PEI, but still.
Who follow politics?
I'm going to get so many letters after this appearance. It's going to be all right, I'm offended because I'm one of these. Anyways,
we have 800 listeners. I don't think we have any in PEI.
Statistically speaking, no. You have half a listener in PEI.
So that half a person.
Yeah, but
I know some people from PEI.
Yeah, me too.
They don't live there anymore.
PEI is lovely, but I have nothing against PEI. PEI is great. You should go there. But Eastern Atlantic Canada, man, that's some beautiful country up there. But anyways, so so they had red dirt. You can go scoop some. Anyway, when I was in school, everyone would go to PEI on vacation. They'd come back with things full of red dirt and they'd pass it around. Anyways, so my point being, apropos. So, the NDP numbers in Quebec weren't great. That's worth noting. They were pretty good in BC, and they were pretty good in Ontario. They were not good in Quebec, which I find really interesting because there is this concern about Jagmeet Singh, which is, can he win in Quebec? And let's be plain, talk about getting letters. Let's be plain. Everyone's looking at me right now. I was like, oh my God, is he going to say it? The question of can he win in Quebec is, will Quebecers vote for a brown guy who wears religious headgear? That's what that is. And, come at me, Quebec, but like it or not, that's what that is. And there is a real question and an open question. And I think after Bouchard-Taylor, And ongoing debate since then, debates on reasonable accommodation and so on, if that's a legitimate question to ask. And including some polling data, by the way, that suggests that's a legit question to ask. And I think that's a bit of a concern for the NDP and for folks supporting JVC. But the Ontario numbers and the BC numbers, I think, are encouraging.
So NDP, just to close this out, signed up 4,900 people in Quebec. Jagmeet claims 1.2 thousand. 1,200. Sorry, I said that in like the worst. I'm looking at this graph or this map that says 1.2K plus.
Yeah.
So 1,200, but 1.2 thousand. So he actually did the worst in Quebec, whereas in BC, for example, he says he signed up 10,000 out of 30,000, or in Ontario he signed up 30,000 out of 50,000. So
which tells you something, because as you know, Quebec is a very progressive secular society, and the way you know is that they have a giant cross in their legislature.
And in the middle of Montreal and elsewhere.
Anyways, I look forward to your letters.
But all right, before we move into just some open questions from the audience before we take a break, David, where can people find you for those listening who aren't following your sassiness?
I drink
Twitter.
at the Regal Beagle every day.
It's like 2 blocks from my house.
It is.
You live close to me.
Never mind.
No,
I do not live in Kitsilano. Don't come find me. Quebec paramilitary.
Where can they find you on the internet?
Here's a pro tip for podcasting. Be sure to have a few drinks before you go on.
Always.
Just to loosen up. I'm on the Twitter box at David_Moscrop. You can go to davidmoscrop.com, and there's a little contact bar there where you can get in touch if you want to send me some mail. Or you can email me. Yes, david.moscrop@gmail.com. I love feedback. I respond to all of it compulsively, not because I can't help it. So I will respond. And I'm much nicer in person than I seem. Also, I have a book coming out in the fall of 2019, which will be available at fine bookstores everywhere, which I highly encourage you to buy. It's very good. Probably it will be.
So we're back for part 2. We're here with the Pod Keep Our Land crew. Introduce yourselves. Let's start from this end.
I'm Erin Rennie.
Erin, what's your background?
I've done lots of different kinds of political things and studied political science. And it's great to be here with my people, fans of BC politics. It's a real delight to see a room full of people who want to geek out about BC politics, who are not the youth wing of a political party.
They're the youth wing of all political parties.
It's been really fun so far, and so thanks for having us on the show.
I'm Patrick Meehan. I geography at UBC, and I went to UBC much like my 2 podcast compatriots. And my background, I guess, I got involved in student politics early on and sort of stayed in it for farther than I should have. But I came from Surrey, and I spent a bit of time in the Surrey New Democrats.
I am Matthew Naylor, and I was a very partisan child growing up in Alberta.
What does partisan child mean, by the way?
Well, no, I had the buttons. I had like a liberal sign on my locker.
You were a liberal in Alberta.
No. You voted NDP once, didn't you?
No. In grade 8, when my social studies teacher, she said that this was during the 2000 election, she would vote for whomever her class elected her to vote for, and I voted NDP when I was in grade 8 when I was 14, and so I got over that
you've done it once,
not having a brain thing, and then mellowed out into a nice centrist.
See, I remember growing up in Alberta. I grew up just outside Calgary, and when I was a kid, our middle school, early high school, that same age, had us write the essay about who would you vote for in this election. Might even be in the same election. I think I wrote an essay about why I'd vote for the Reform Party, because the West needed a voice. And that just sort of tells you how much I adopted the generic rhetoric that was around me.
Still wearing green.
It was only later I learned that the West's voice was kind of stupid, and I didn't agree with that. And now I vote NDP because there's not anything better. I love Royal Canadian Air Force. That was what I grew up on. All right. Well, we're back, and we want to talk about the BC Liberal leadership race with you guys, and we want to talk about the federal cabinet shuffle and the shadow cabinet. But first, maybe let's just do a quick free plug for your podcast, Pod Keep Our Land. What is it? How did it get started? Why should people listen?
Pod Keep Our Land is a show about Canadian politics, parliament's policy, and politicians. We got started because I got back from Australia. I recently did some school in Australia, and I got back and I went out for beers with Pat, and we ended up coming up with this idea about starting a podcast.
Well,
okay, all right. How about you tell the story?
You pitched the idea to me, and I said, as long as you really cut down the partisanship,
Which, like, it is an interesting thing for me.
and I think I made you thrice promise.
Like, the dark occult rituals that went into the beginning of the podcast aside, partisanship for me was, like, something that I really enjoyed and got involved with, and then, like, around last November, for reasons that, something happened last November that was a bit of a shock to my world, and after the election of the current president, I kind of reevaluated how people could engage in politics and wanted to see about having a little bit more of a adult and nuanced conversation about policy and stuff.
Yeah, so then I agreed to it, and then
I asked Aaron, and things have snowballed from there. And so we encourage you to check out Pod Keep Our Land, which is available on the iTunes Store. On Stitcher now, we just got our approval for Stitcher, and on our website, which is currently podkeepourland.podbean.com, but we're hopefully getting something going up there pretty soon.
Cool. And since I don't think I've ever asked you, Scott, what's your version of the Politicos founding story? Because I have my version, but...
It was more or less one day you messaged me. I think I was at work at the time, but you Facebook messaged me saying, "Hey, you want to start a podcast?" And yeah, that was more or less how it started. We met up for beers a day or two later and kind of hashed it out. But yeah, the long and the short of it is there wasn't a voice for kind of BC politics at the time, and you had a bunch of lefty friends, and you wanted someone who wouldn't always just nod along with you every time you said something on the podcast.
Yeah, we debated at enough pub nights, but in enough of a way that we could find common ground, or at least you weren't the Kelly Leach level of
the bar of a good conservative. You're not Kelly Leach.
Yeah, he's a Michael Chong conservative, and he'll freely admit that, right?
So a New Democrat.
basically the same thing these days.
Don't even get me started the number of times I had to hear he's just a liberal during the campaign.
Not a liberal. Ooh.
See, I've listened to all your shows, I'll be honest, and
Thank you.
They're good.
Normally people lie about
I took
that.
you as more of a conservative, but I guess, BC Liberal and federal liberal.
Yeah, I'm BC Liberal, federal Liberal, grew up in Alberta, so that I have conservative tendencies,
I think it's safe to say that there's two Liberal parties in British Columbia. There's the Liberal Party in the Lower Mainland, at least areas not south of the Fraser. And that Liberal Party is fairly urbane. It's the Moira Stillwell Party to a large degree, which, by the way, if you're not following Moira Stillwell on Twitter, it's great. And I think that, Naylor, you fall into that realm. And then there's the sort of the Beyond Hope Liberal Party that, yeah.
Which is more the federal conservative party.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's say.
We're a coalition party. It's a big tent.
Well, since we're into this, the big news this week was that the BC Liberals announced their leadership rules, and they sort of immediately had to amend them because they realized they had accidentally scheduled their leadership announcement for Super Bowl Sunday. And unsurprisingly, the BC Liberal membership and the Super Bowl Sunday following had a very large sort of overlap in that Venn diagram. And they went, well, we can't have that. NDP would not have this problem.
I'm just going to say that it does kind of give you an idea of the kind of person who's sitting on the provincial executive boards, because that clearly didn't cross their mind.
I do want to say, though, that I got to hand kudos to whoever runs the Twitter account for the BC Liberals, because tweeting, after requesting for a change of date for the Super Bowl, the NFL rejected it. And so now we have decided to move the date of our leadership convention. I got to say, that is the best social media move I've seen in a long time, of trying to find a bad news day and turn it good.
That's pretty funny.
So aside from the moving of the date, does anyone want to run us through the BC Liberal leadership rules sort of headlines, or should we just wait until I've pulled them up, Erin?
Sure. So one of the things that really struck me was the spending cap has gone up quite significantly since the last leadership race. It was $450,000 in 2011. Now it's $600,000 for your campaign, which is pretty significant. You have to be able to, if that's the cap, most people are going to go up to the cap, and you have to be able to raise that much money in order to participate in this race. So that leaves a lot of people out, leaves a lot of voices out, I would think.
Do you think that affects the image of the BC Liberals, which going into this last election was very heavy on the, big money Liberals? They need they're the ones who, until the very last minute, were not in favor of campaign finance reform, and here they are sort of basically being open to as big a money as they can in their leadership race.
Yeah, it does really speak to that issue of campaign finance, and when BC is getting international news on campaign finance being the Wild West over here in BC on who can donate how much, it raises eyebrows. So I don't know. It's good that we've got a cap at least, I guess.
I do tend to think that people don't pay attention to leadership races, the public generally. I think that could be an attack that would be fairly salient, given that it's already perceived weakness. But I also don't think that generally the general public pays attention too much to leadership races, anywhere near as much as they should.
I think the actual impact of whether or not the BC Liberals, I would prefer that the cap be basically the same as last time, because allowing...
Because it worked really well last time.
I don't know, we got a leader out of it. What more do you want?
That is not a baseline for success on a leadership race.
We got a leader, we won an election. It's... there is... I don't see it actually being that big of a deal. Sure, I understand the bigger issue around campaign finance and that kind of thing, but those rules are going to get changed, and it's one of those things about water and pavement. You just find every crack and seep into it, and that's money in politics. It's there's a lot. There's the analogy that was. Yeah, I structured that analogy.
At Pod Keep Our Land, our analogies are nothing if not tortured.
But I just don't see it being a big voting issue that people are going to cast a ballot on.
Oh no!
In a year and a half when the next general election is.
I think it's $200,000. Is that really going to be the difference between someone voting for the Liberals or not? What the spending cap was on the leadership race? It just doesn't seem to be a huge thing that people will really care about.
I think the more interesting thing for me is the breakdown of votes for the leadership race, and how every riding matters in the BC Liberal leadership race. And it's a model of leadership voting that I actually really support. Is the votes are weighted by riding, and so if there's 1,000 members in one riding and there's 5 members in the other riding, those 5 members have far more influence on the overall result than the 1,000 members. And I actually think that actually adds democracy to the system, because it means that areas that the BC Liberals are not strong on still have a voice.
It's a very I was going to say it's very similar. It's the exact same model that the federal Conservatives have, which is, weight by riding. And when you have the electoral system we have, single member plurality, it's not easy to say that word after... I'm not going to say how many beers. Beers.
A plurality.
A plurality of beers. It makes sense. It makes sense to sort of weight by riding, because especially after this last election, where the Liberals were weak in urban centers but strong in rural areas, and they need to sort of balance that out. So the system does favor sort of a candidate who can appeal broadly,
and
which is
for a
what you
big-
need in an election.
Especially for a party like the BC Liberals, or to a slightly lesser extent the Conservatives, that are a big tent party who need to be, if they're going to be successful, get in support from all of those ridings.
I think it's also interesting is that we talk about the Lower Mainland and the interior when it comes to the BC Liberals. There's a third part of BC. And I think that the island is going to play a part in this because of this system. Whereas normally on the island, there's, I think, 14 ridings. And my numbers might be out of date, but there's like 14 ridings on the island. I think the Liberals traditionally get 2 of them. And so those island ridings will also have a voice. So every leadership candidate will also have a reason to go to the island and actually care about island issues and want to talk about BC ferries and want to talk about the other issues that the BC Liberals have frankly not cared about for a while. I like the leadership system because it makes you want to be the leader of the whole province.
So I had the distinct privilege of being one of the 200 or so most valuable BC Liberals in the last election because I was living in Vancouver, Mount Pleasant at the time, which is a hotbed of BC Liberal activism. And I had picked my candidate, which was Christy Clark at the time, and this was basically how her campaign won the election for her, is by going and targeting and focusing on membership sales in areas that the BC Liberal Party was not traditionally strong. And so not only picking up places where the other candidates didn't have strong networks, but being able to pick up particularly valuable voters who would be able to send more points to the convention.
I want to pick up on something Pat said about urban-rural divide, and a lot of it has been written about this and said about, are they going to go more urban? Are they going to go more rural? Who do they have to pick in order to beat John Horgan? And I'm beginning to question whether there really is an urban-rural divide in the province. I think it's a good point you make about the island being, the third voice here that we do need to consider. But when you think about Christy Clark, she wasn't really a rural candidate. She doesn't come from...
Well, she represented Kelowna.
Well, only after she lost
only after she,
Vancouver.
Yeah.
Right,
No, your point is...
we're talking
my jokes aside.
Yeah, we're talking about a former mayoral candidate here
No.
for Vancouver.
My jokes aside, I think you're onto something really, really accurate here.
Yeah. So I think a lot is being said about this urban-rural thing, but I don't think that's what is going to make the difference in this campaign. I think it's going to be more about who can present a vision for the whole province that is going to really excite people and make people want to get behind them. So, and it's got to be something more than families or jobs.
Do you think there's any of you, in this race? Not that there's a race yet, but
Are there any of us in this race?
well, no. Is there anyone
there is a race.
who's been
But
tossed around?
I think the thing is that there is a race. Even if no one has put their name in yet, people have put their name in consideration.
Yeah.
People are meeting with people. I mean, even just average members of the party are meeting with actual MLAs or actual candidates, like the potential candidates already, and having private meetings with them and saying, "Hey, I want to be on your team." I think that the beauty of a leadership race, the really interesting thing about a leadership race, is it truly is really grassroots, and it's really exciting to watch it unfold.
I'm just going to take one quick jab because it's so easy. And reading through the rules, there's this one section on party unity, which
Oh yeah.
I've looked at a couple of these documents. I haven't looked at every leadership race document ever, but I just noticed in this one, this party unity section, Article 9, where 9.1 is all leadership contestants must, in writing, undertake to the party to, and A is pledge their support for the leader, which I get the point of. You kind of just need to say, no matter what happens, if you're a BC Liberal running for BC Liberal leadership, no matter who wins, you should probably get behind that leader, or else why are you running for leadership?
It's the BC Conservatives.
But there's
Asterisk. It's the don't run for leader to raise your profile and then jump ship to the BC Conservatives when you don't win. And I know that this happens municipally. I've seen it happen in municipal elections where I was a staff person on, not Vancouver, but and it does happen as the non-compete clause essentially, and they're not enforceable. God
No,
knows
of
they're
course
not
not.
enforceable, but it's a way for you to be able to hit them over the head with it later. And I think
because it goes beyond that. It talks about like you have to pledge to campaign for this person. You have to
There's
do all these other things.
one fear that the Free Market Party in BC, and it changes its name every couple of decades. There's
The
one
anti-NDP
fear
parties.
that the anti-NDP party has, and that's that they'll split the vote. That's the only fear they have. We have got 70 years of uninterrupted. Everybody on the right comes together and decides to hate the left, and so they're afraid of that.
And now it's very interesting because the vote split this time was green, because that is what lost the BC Liberal Party a large amount of urban ridings, and this was not a playbook that the BC Liberals were prepared for. They fought the last battle. They fought the
it also
2002.
cost the NDP ridings too.
That yes, but who is premier?
Well,
This
Yeah,
is
no, fair point.
well,
fair point.
they picked up 2 ridings, one of which was basically a tie, save for a few votes last time. That was
That was
Saanich.
Gary Holman's riding Saanich North in the
that
Islands.
Adam Olsen is
No,
now
but
representing.
Gary
But that
Holman-
was basically
That was always a Green or a Liberal riding. It was just one electoral cycle that NDP picked it up.
But if you,
it
if you-
was yeah
if you
that
look,
and then
sorry, if you look at the ridings where the Greens experienced some of the highest gains, it was the ridings where the BC Liberals were experiencing some very substantial reductions in vote totals, and
False Creek.
there should be some hesitation about making these like one-to-one comparisons, but there are a group of, I would say, Gordon Campbell liberals, like the people who were in favor of the carbon tax and that kind of thing, who were urban and very disillusioned and felt left out of the, what the Christy Clark Liberal Party ended up being.
yeah, and I've definitely heard those same kind of behind the scenes grumblings by urban BC Liberals who were looking at possibly jumping ship to the Greens going forward on a more permanent basis than just this last campaign. But that's, of course, going to depend on who gets to be the Liberal leader going forward. If it's someone from Metro Vancouver who speaks to those urban issues, I kind of see it shifting back a bit.
Or where the Greens end up going is it was really easy for the Greens to be the party of everybody when they were only, Andrew Weaver. But now that they're sort of a 3-party caucus that has sort of a handle on power, where they end up going as a what I think will end up being a pro-environment, pro-business party, that could appeal to the BC Liberals. But that might not be where they end up going. The Wild Rose at one point had very progressive policies on a number of things. The Reform Party had a number of very progressive policies on a number of things at the very early stages. But as soon as they got a bunch of MLAs, that made the party, and that changed everything. And so the BC Greens, where they go politically, is going to be really interesting to see.
So this leadership race has, and these rules have a number of stipulations. There's going to be debates in Vancouver, Surrey, Prince George, the Thompson Okanagan generally, Nanaimo. It literally says at a location in the Thompson Okanagan region, which I guess is Kelowna, Vernon, or Kamloops. Or maybe Princeton.
The South Fraser, I think, elects the BC
Right,
leader.
the Princeton debate, that'll be great.
Yeah.
Literally the amount of attendees, the hangers-on for the candidates would overwhelm the town.
Interestingly, it also says Nanaimo and a location designated by the Indigenous Network. Did they make a mistake not putting Victoria in there? Or is there anywhere else they should have put in
There's
there?
only
explicitly?
one riding in Victoria that they win regularly, and they'll never lose it.
But
So do they need to go to
since,
Victoria?
well, but since the vote is weighted by riding, it actually matters more.
But if you move a debate there, you're going to support the candidate that is the urban candidate.
Yeah, not only that, Nanaimo's much more central on the island. You'll get people
Also a
traveling
good point.
from Victoria and up island there, and it kind of serves as the nexus of Vancouver Island in a lot of ways.
Fair enough.
So
And
it makes sense. And plus, Victoria's the capital. Nobody wants to hold a debate there. It's all going
It's
to be party.
a sick culture, I believe. A sick culture, is that Christy Clark's line?
that was pretty close.
Yeah.
That's why she was never there.
Although
This is also
in fairness,
only,
BC's political culture, especially in the legislature, is toxic.
Accurate.
this is also only the required official events.
Yeah.
There will undoubtedly be others. Do you think there's anything else that was missed? Should there be more in the north or rural? Like, there's Prince George, the Thompson Okanagan. There's nothing in Fraser Valley.
Well,
unless you count Surrey, which is a real
Surrey
reach.
counts as the Fraser Valley, and it'd be in South
Does
Surrey. It'll be South Surrey, which is very geographically close in terms of the highway coverage to Langley and Abbotsford. It'll be fine in terms of that. Surrey has a lot in common in terms of the Liberal supporters with Langley and Abbotsford in that area, and so that'll.
I mean, like, what is the point of these debates? The point of these debates is to expose as many Liberal members to one-on-one FaceTime with the candidates as possible. And putting them in Victoria compared to Nanaimo doesn't make a lot of sense to me because there are more BC Liberal members in Nanaimo and more engaged party. Like, actually, it's the density of members is more sensible to put it in, like, these certain, like in terms of absolute numbers, I don't necessarily know if it's true, but like
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So you've been involved in these things a lot. I've been involved in these things a lot. I've never watched until this federal NDP leadership race. I've never watched a race where during the debates I didn't know who I was already supporting. Have you ever watched a debate for a party that you didn't know who you were already supporting?
No.
Yeah, and that's the federal NDP race right now is unique. I think in the realm of I don't know very many New Democrats other than the Nikki people who really know who they're supporting on the first ballot. And so these leadership races, like you were saying, they're not for party faithful. I think they're for the party adjacent, the people that might take out a membership, the people that might be your next foot soldiers if you can get them into the party. And so putting it in Surrey is a great idea because you've got 4 ridings you want to take back. Putting it in Nanaimo is great because there's ridings in that area that maybe could become in play one day.
And it's also a way to practice your key messages for the next campaign.
Yeah.
And Surrey's close enough to Vancouver that those people who are so desperate to watch
Get on
two
the Sky
BC
train.
Liberal leadership race debates can see them. And undoubtedly multiple people's room will go to those because that's the kind of people who are here.
Not Super Bowl people.
Not well.
So much.
So Super Bowl's not till early February,
Yeah.
right? It's till
Yeah.
February 4th or whatever it was going to be, February 3rd. I don't care. Because if I do care about football, I'll care about the CFL because Canadian, right?
Really?
Patriotism.
Yeah.
I've watched some CFL.
Wait,
games.
are you the
I'm
only
not.
person in Canada who prefers CFL to NFL?
I don't. Sorry, you're aware of Saskatchewan, right?
Okay,
Like,
sorry. Are you the only person that doesn't call it a bunny hug that supports NFL over CFL?
I was not expecting this to be the most divisive topic of the
regionalism.
My question was going to be jumping off of that based on the date of the Liberals aren't choosing their leader till early February. What does that mean for the BC NDP government as it stands right now and the Greens in their weird sort of opposition but also supporting the government on key bills position? Anyone who wants to jump
Well,
in.
it means they got a little breathing room.
Yeah, I mean, I think John Horgan actually used the phrase "breathing room." I think John Horgan, if anything, is a breath of fresh air in that he's willing to say he's actually just willing to say things like, "Well, that gives us some breathing room politically." Yeah, strategically speaking, that's pretty good for us. I got to admit,
It's not a bad thing.
like I actually kind of like how he is the only person the only politician I've ever seen that has no filter when it comes to actually saying the real. And he literally was like, yeah, we got
Have you
breathing.
met Donald Trump?
Okay. Let's not
Oh, sorry, you said the real.
let's not compare.
Okay.
But like he literally said, and you're right, it gives us some breathing room because there's now a 2-vote advantage. They don't have, a couple of people can go off on a junket or, somebody can, God forbid, have the flu or something like that without failing the government outright. I think that's, you've got 6 months of that from the moment at which Christy Clark resigned before the election has to be called, and then another 6 weeks before that election result is in. So you basically eat yourself until the end of the spring session.
And,
Yeah,
then, and then the question becomes which party is going to be the first to wheel their MLA in on a stretcher to cast a vote.
Which actually happened in the '79.
Oh yeah, no, I'm saying this will
that's
happen.
Like, you're not joking. Yeah.
Well,
And it gives the NDP Greens a chance to govern and to do some good things, and probably also to reveal some of their weaknesses, which is probably going to be good for the BC Liberal race because it gives them something to oppose. They're not just opposing a party that's only just come into power and is sort of in that honeymoon phase.
And good for good for the Liberals too, because they were going to need to engineer periods where they didn't have their full caucus there and pretend, oh, we're really sorry that Simon Gibson didn't make it on the ferry. Unfortunately, it was a mistake. We would love to take down the government now and go into an election, but unfortunately, he wasn't here. It means that they get a chance to actually sit back, yell, and scream without having to actually take down a government while they go through a leadership race.
So if Christy Clark gone, it gives them an option to run all the leadership campaign without having to vote against them on everything and risk taking down the government. And on the Liberal side, 6 months is a fairly short leadership campaign. It's about the shortest they could reasonably push it without really compressing it too much.
Actually, I used to think that, but Naylor, you said it. That seems to be the way of things for the party.
2011 was relatively short because Gordon Campbell resigned in, I want to say October or November or something like that, and we were going to a leadership campaign in mid-February, late February, if I remember correctly. Like the compression isn't like it. I remember actually the NDP starting their campaign, then the BC Liberals starting their campaign, Christmas, and then the BC Liberals ending their campaign, me getting a job and moving to Victoria, and then the BC NDP ending their campaign like a month
Well,
later.
that also had another reason why you had to compress it, is because there was a premier slot
You need to
fill.
have a premier.
And for an opposition campaign,
But even compare the federal NDP with the federal Conservative Party. The federal Conservative Party leadership race was very short, and the
better part of a year.
But remember the federal NDP leadership race for Mulcair? That was, I think, 18 months. And then where Mulcair
It's
won it,
still ongoing.
and then I'm talking about the one where Mulcair won it, and now we're looking at the replace Mulcair. Mulcair resigned, I think, on election night.
No, he didn't.
Oh no, you're right. He didn't. He had to be forced out.
Are you really forgetting this?
I tried to, and then he was forced out in Edmonton like over a year ago. And
He should have resigned on election
well, yes,
night.
but anyways.
He got booted unceremoniously.
Yes,
At the
but the
convention
thing
in
is that
February,
we're
still waiting for him to leave.
The NDP seemed to like
No
to have
offense.
extremely long leadership races. The right of center parties seem to have very short ones.
Well,
you look at the Conservative leadership race federally was relatively short.
This last one wasn't. That's
Yeah,
right.
they announced the
Wasn't
first
it-
candidates announced early summer 2016, and we didn't have a leader till May of 2017.
No, you're right. That was about a year.
I do think the BC NDP, though, when Glenn Clark resigned, because
Are we going back that far?
well,
I was in high school.
How many were there? When he resigned, there was an interim leader for a while.
Dan Miller.
Dan Miller, who I always forget, like that extra BC NDP premier that.
There's
no
been
one
5 of them now,
Yeah, if you count him.
if you can.
And then they finally settled on Ujjal Dosanjh, who got to handle the sinking ship.
Good health minister.
I mean,
I met him. He's a great guy, but
Yeah.
he got given a sinking ship.
But
so
Dan Miller was only premier, I think, for about 6 months, wasn't he? I'd have to check.
He had to deal with that whole leadership race.
But it was a
So-
relatively short leadership race there
It was
because
long enough
there was a
that-
premiership on the line. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good point.
So that one was extended. But getting back to the topic at
Sorry.
hand. No, this is a good diversion. That's why we're here tonight.
Sorry, what was the topic?
The topic at hand is the BC Liberal
It's
leadership.
mocking
What it
the
does
NDP
mean.
is, I
So,
think, what it is.
it gives the BC NDP a bit of breathing room. But one of the things I've noticed, even sort of since Christy Clark essentially just vanished from public life, is she sort of, like, she had her, I'm resigning, and then it was, I guess this will be my last public statement. We haven't heard from her since. Honestly, has anyone?
But I think that's the mark of a good former leader, to be honest.
Well,
I don't want to give her a lot of credit because I don't think she was a good premier. But I actually think the mark of a good former leader is to leave and allow the thing to happen. You guys talked earlier about how it's only the NDP former leaders who seem to get involved, and I think that's actually a good point.
And if Christy Clark will do anything, it will be the thing that is good for the party. At least in her mind.
You were not sarcastic.
Wait,
No,
wait.
I'm not.
Okay.
You
sounded
overlap?
a bit.
What's the
but
overlap
I just
between
wanna
Christy Clark and the party? Is it 1-to-1 overlap, or is it?
Yeah, I think it was today's BC Liberals or Christy Clark's BC Liberals. It was like the premier was very.
There's a
Was
lot
like
of things we could add here.
extremely partisan, and I think didn't have a lot of things that she really wanted to do once she got the power. She just enjoyed like using it.
Yeah,
So-
actually, no. Like that's I think the most accurate assessment you could possibly have.
Like I know that she really liked the Bennetts, and it
Yeah.
she one of her closest advisors was Brad Bennett.
The third.
Brad Bennett is the son of Bill and the other Bennett.
Right.
Who was also named Bill. Was it Bill?
It's William,
A lot
then
of Bill
Bill.
Bennett.
It's William
Yeah.
Anderson, Cecil Bennett, then Bill Bennett, then Brad Bennett.
Yeah, so wacky Bill, Brad, the Bennetts, and Christy Clark was very, very enamored with what Wacky Bennett did, and I know that there was some BC Liberal culture that had the Time magazine cover that had Wacky Bennett on it that said, Canada's secret boom, or Canada the boom that nobody noticed. She really bought into that idea of trying to build stuff to build BC, and
Interesting.
in a kind of manner that brings to mind Robert Moses for people who are
Oh man.
urban planners. There are
obscure reference.
Well, I think
for the night,
yeah.
but
so. I think the thing is that Wacky Bennett had an obsession with mega projects in the Peace River region and other areas, and Bill Bennett, his son, also did too. And I think you're right that
But
Christy,
he also
Christy
built
similarly,
SFU,
but Christy similarly also wanted to build Site C Dam, which it seems like is going to go ahead based on today's reports. But she had her only real thing was this Site C Dam, I think, or the Massey Tunnel Bridge.
and the giant stupid bridge.
Yeah, that never should have been built, and won't be built
Well,
now, hopefully.
There
Anyways.
needs to be a new crossing there, whether or not it needs to be
Does there?
10 lane. Yeah,
Let's get into that in another podcast.
yeah,
the
that's a
tunnel.
big-
Whoa,
tunnel
whoa.
needs replacing.
Let's get into
But
that in another podcast.
a
I got a
10-lane mega bridge is
bunch
probably
of
not
comments. I think we're supposed to talk about the leadership race that's coming up, though. Woo! Is that
Well, that's
it?
what we were basically talking about. Well, the rules, and we've covered the rules pretty well. One of the things I've noticed is no one's paid attention to Rich Coleman for how long has he been interim leader?
It's true.
Good, excellent. The
I think-
best.
I
It's
actually-
the best thing that he could be doing.
I
The
actually
best
think-
thing. So Andrew Weaver has been in the news multiple times, sort of opposing the NDP government or presenting alternate visions, like on Uber sort of ride-sharing stuff, talking about minimum wage.
He's carving himself out as a bit pro-business environmentalist. He's supporting
Yeah, Weaver.
Uber, the disrupting company that deregulates everything to do with employee workforce protections as well as consumer protections. He's supporting not going to $15 minimum wage because he doesn't think that he thinks it'll hurt small businesses. He's carving himself out as a I think that the phrase, what was the phrase, Scott, you used earlier that I loved?
Tours with bikes.
Tories with bikes. And he's carving himself out as the environmentalist that likes business. And I think that works for him. I think that absolutely works for his voter base. I think that works for him expanding his base beyond 3 seats. I think that's good. But also it's very, very sexy for the media to focus on the infighting between him and Horgan.
Yeah.
It's not sexy to focus on the things that Rich Coleman is talking about.
But also, from the perspective of someone who is looking at leadership campaigns, it's not Rich Coleman's place to be setting the direction of the party.
Sure.
That is a process that now is in the hands of BC Liberal members, which is an exciting exercise in democracy, and so there is going to be a debate within the party about what this is about, and also John Horgan hasn't introduced any legislation, and so there isn't much to concretely oppose. Beyond that, you shouldn't get in the way of your opponents when they are in the middle of trying to, shoot themselves in the foot or tear each other's throats out. So I think that Rich Coleman is doing exactly what he should be doing as a partisan actor.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see when the legislature resumes. But as far as a interim leader, I think actually Rona Ambrose probably set a really good role model on how to do that.
She
opposed, but not too harshly. Didn't really change the direction of the party.
I think she did. I think she reset the party as a party that smiles, and a party that actually cares about people. And I think that was the party's biggest negatives, and she did a really good job of that as interim. It's unfortunate that Andrew Scheer is not necessarily following up on that.
I have many opinions.
But I actually think that Ron Ambrose did a great job of taking the negatives of the party and making them positives while waiting for the leadership race.
Yeah, she definitely smoothed the edges off the party during the leadership race while she was interim leader.
And probably a lot of the leadership that happens if you're interim leader is happening behind closed doors. You're trying to bring people back together after losing an election. That's hard. You're trying to keep people together during a leadership race. That's hard. And it's not really something you want to be airing on the media. So while it may look like nothing's happening, I'm sure there's lots going on.
So while we're on the subject, I guess, of federal politics, let's transition into second big, broad-ranging topic we want to talk to you guys with, and that's sort of shuffling the chairs at the federal level. So this past week we saw Justin Trudeau announce sort of a cabinet shuffle. He invented a new position, as in he split apart the Indigenous Affairs Department into a sort of deal with sort of federal Indigenous relations and reconciliation kind of position, and a more just service, like providing money to Indigenous peoples and creating a second department for that, as had been called for in a report, I guess, 20 years ago from one of the Indigenous studies. As
the wheels of bureaucracy run particularly slowly, apparently, when it comes to Indigenous affairs. The fact that was a report that was tabled in 1996, I think, and there are people. I think there's somebody I follow on Twitter. His name's Alex Usher. He's a luminary in AVED policy, post-secondary policy. His father, I think he said, helped write that report. And he's now relatively not old. I don't want to say old just in case he listens to my podcast. But he's up there in terms of being in his late 30s, early 40s. And his dad helped write a report that got followed through on today.
And then I guess the other big news this week was Andrew Scheer announced his shadow cabinet. So, which has all kinds of interesting sort of who gets what in terms of a leadership race. But let's start with the Trudeau announcement. There wasn't a ton of sort of deck changing. It's hard to say if it's a full cabinet shuffle.
I liked Paul Wells is always my go-to when it comes to federal politics, and I'm probably going to reference him a few times today. But Paul Wells said that Trudeau has embraced the medium-sized cabinet shuffle. The question always used to be, is this going to be a minor cabinet shuffle or a major cabinet shuffle? And no one really has ever had a consistent pattern of medium cabinet shuffles prior to what appears to be Justin Trudeau's pattern. And now you've got every shuffle here happens to be 6 or 7 people moving around. Some people coming up, some people getting out, some people moving around. Whereas a minor cabinet shuffle is 2 or 3, and a major cabinet shuffle is 10. He's the only one that does a medium cabinet shuffle.
So what do we think of this idea of splitting the Indigenous Affairs Department in half?
In my gut, that feels right. Like it feels like if we're going to have this dual relationship with Indigenous people and Indigenous peoples, there has to be a nation-to-nation relationship with the peoples, plural, and a service provider relationship with the people, singular.
Can I asterisk this service provider element? I think there's the nation to nation element, and then there's also the treaty obligation element. And I think that the Indigenous Affairs Minister has a treaty obligation to a host of things, including education, healthcare provision, and a host of other things. And the federal government has been woefully inadequate on all of them, spending far less on education for Indigenous peoples than any provincial government spends on its own people, and so on and so forth. To the immediate chagrin of all of those stupid internet memes that say that we spend way more. But I do like what Naylor said, is that Matthew says the right thing, is that, having the minister in charge of treaty obligations and the minister in charge of making a new deal and making a new relationship is, I think, I actually think a positive step forward, potentially.
Do you think...
Oh, sorry.
It's really interesting to see like this acknowledgement that part of the problem and the reason that we haven't had progress on this file is rooted in the organization of the government and itself. And I think it's exciting. It's interesting to see that there's that willingness to try something new. I'd be interested to hear a little bit more from Indigenous leaders to hear what they think.
Do we think any of this is a sign that, I think it was Carolyn Bennett was in the role,
She still is
in one of the roles, hasn't been successful in that? Do we think it's the sort of a sign that because one of the big criticisms of the Trudeau Liberals in their first term, and we're saying first term because I think most people are sort of in this they're going to win again because...
We don't vote out governments. We don't vote in new governments. We vote out old governments. Yeah.
So one of the criticisms has been this, specifically on, for example, the missing murdered Indigenous women inquiry that hasn't really progressed and has just really taken a lot of heat for sort of spinning its tires, having trouble dealing with families who are affected by this, and not taking in input, and meanwhile spending a lot of money doing no one really knows what. So is this a sign the Liberals have sort of been failing at their promise to implement every step of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission?
I don't think it's a sign of failure necessarily, but I do think it speaks to a desire to move faster. And one of the criticisms we hear about Trudeau's government is that he hasn't really changed any policy. He doesn't have any policy to sort of to speak to quite yet, and he's halfway through his mandate. So this is one of his big promises, and it needs to happen before the next election, I would think, or needs to see some progress there. So maybe by having two really excellent ministers and splitting the file into two, you can get some progress a little faster.
I definitely agree. I think it's also the ministry, as it has always been, sort of destroys people. You get stuck in the problems, and I think that splitting it off, Carolyn Bennett is going to focus on the things that ministry has always been. But it seems like the Trudeau ministry likes ministers who are willing to move forward and think outside the box. And Jane Philpott has been that. And her moving into this role, I don't know what the ceiling has been placed on her is. I think she may have been, and I'm quoting Paul Wells because he's sort of my go-to, she may have been given the okay to think big on what is reconciliation, what is a nation-to-nations support, what is support and reconciliation and relationship. And I think, what that comes out as, it could be a lot of things. And the one thing that I've heard bandied about is potentially actual federal government transfers similar to provincial transfers to Indigenous groups. And I think that's on the table, is what I would think, based on the idea of splitting this off into somebody who's going to renegotiate a new relationship. It may not happen and it may not be real, but I think that this government cares about it. I think Justin Trudeau, for as much as I will mock him for his shallowness on other policy levels, I think on Indigenous issues, I think he's real, and I hope I hope it goes well.
Yeah, we'll have to see. But there's been definitely a few of those cabinet positions that have gotten progressively less ambitious as they go forward, notably democratic
reform, where ministers go to die.
So okay, but before we leave the Indigenous Affairs portfolio, I think that, to be honest, this seems more like a vote of confidence in Carolyn Bennett than anything else. I think that she has been pushing for a very, very long time within the party to be a voice for a new conceptualization of the relationship between the government and Indigenous peoples, and she has spoken to she thinks about this very, very philosophically. She spoke in favor of the monarchism resolution, against the monarchism resolution, which was in favor of the monarchy at the 2012 Liberal Convention because of how
at the Liberal Convention there was a monarchism resolution.
That's the most liberal thing ever.
Yeah. So
what was the resolution? Sorry to derail you, but I need to know this.
Okay, so the resolution was to set up a committee to examine whether or not Canada should maintain ties with the monarchy in the future.
You had a Republicanism motion.
Yes,
Did it pass?
No, apparently this came out at the NDP debate in Quebec. It was like, do you support the monarchy? And they're all like, eh. Which is the most
That's
NDP,
the most Canadian response possible.
But before
liberal thing.
The Liberal one, this is the same resolution, like they were right after the other. Pro-monarchy, pro-marijuana. Pro-weed,
good stances.
Pro the Windsors. Like it's
I reject one of those.
The Crown and cannabis. It's like the liberal way.
You should listen to Pod Keep Our Land for more of these jokes.
Put it on a t-shirt. Pod Keep Our Land. The Crown and cannabis.
So she is thinking about this like in a very like philosophical way, in a way that I think is important for a minister to be considering these two things. And Jane Philpott is like a heavy hitter when it comes to running a very complicated service delivery ministry, because she has the chops to deal with like a area where the government has unequivocally failed over the past. Which is service provision to
health.
Health.
Yeah,
she
was health minister. She was health minister now.
Until she got moved, and as health minister, she handled renegotiating health accord
all 10 provinces.
Every province individually,
including Manitoba, where the Premier of Manitoba said he would wait forever before signing on.
She did
and
that.
that apparently means 7 months.
She also was health minister, I believe, as the assisted dying legislation came in. Which is a radical overhaul of our health system.
There's one really interesting
full credit
thing.
to her for managing all that.
Yeah,
I don't agree with how the Liberals eventually brought in assisted dying, but she managed it.
Yeah, there's one really interesting thing that I keep finding about the Trudeau cabinet handling is you can fail out of that cabinet and you can succeed up fast. That is rare in Canadian government. In Canadian government, normally, if you are a not so great cabinet minister from an area that's really important, you're there forever, and you're going to be in a pretty high cabinet position. Alberta had this guy named Guy Boudelier who happened to represent the area around Fort McMurray, and he was given relatively high profile cabinet positions all the time because that was an important riding to keep, and he just was awful. He was a terrible cabinet minister, but he was still there for years and years and years. And that's pretty much the norm. The Trudeau cabinet seems to be one where you get in on merit. So Trudeau seems to have looked at himself and said, I don't want anyone else like me. I want to make sure everyone around me got here on merit, because God knows I know how I got here.
And let's just emphasize, on merit, but he still got a gender diverse cabinet. Which is full credit to the Liberal team and him saying these are important things. So credit to him.
So like and speaking to that like meritocracy thing and regionalism, Kent Hare, who was the Minister of Veterans Affairs and also the Associate Minister of National Defence, has become the Minister of Sport and Disabilities.
Yeah.
And there has been some of this other shuffling that has gone on. Carla Qualtrough has moved
up
to Public Works. Yeah. Like Ken Hare has basically been put on probation,
Yeah.
and I don't really think it's entirely his fault because the government has continued litigating a really absurd Veterans Affairs case that they shouldn't be litigating anymore and they should just settle. But he had to carry that water, and so they have hung him out to dry, kind of like they did with Stéphane Dion over the Saudi arms deal.
That's a really good point, is the idea that this government may not be able to recognize very effectively the idea that if you're in a ministry where we're not paying attention to, but you're doing a pretty good job while being, not given anything worthwhile, you're still doing a good job. And that's actually a really good point, is that ministries oftentimes have to be bad news bears, and if you're really good at that, you're still looking pretty bad.
I have a number of family members who live in Calgary and who work with people with disabilities and who know Kent Hare personally. I've never heard a bad thing about Kent Hare from anyone on any side of the political spectrum. So for him to get a quote-unquote demotion, it's just like maybe they're seeing the good things that and they're seeing the good things that cabinet ministers that get support do, but they're not seeing the ways in which cabinet ministers that are unsupported are carrying water for them.
Yeah, and Veterans Affairs is one of those ministries, like Indigenous Affairs,
no
where no one ever does well in it.
No, because the way that we handle Veterans Affairs is actually immoral to our country.
And it's going to go poorly for Seamus O'Regan, who's the new Minister of Veterans Affairs, unless the Trudeau government decides to change its tack on certain policies.
And actually treat veterans with fairness.
But then again...
That would go against 20 years of precedent.
The Trudeau government has to protect Kent Hare now because he's the last Liberal MP in Calgary.
In Calgary, yeah.
Because the other one turned out to be...
Well, he resigned today in disgrace from caucus. He's still staying in as an MP. We'll see where that goes.
Do you guys think that the media puts too much emphasis on this idea of, getting lower profile ministry as a demotion? I can just imagine, if you work in that ministry, how does that feel? If you read in the newspaper that, being the minister of your ministry is less desirable.
But at the same time, some ministries are more important than others.
But
Canada
here's the thing: is what is and isn't an important ministry I think wildly dissociated in the eye of the public from the eye of the government. So, for example, in the eye of the provincial government in BC, regardless of party, this is a non-partisan issue. Post-secondary education is viewed as a lower tier ministry, not a middle tier ministry, not a higher tier ministry, a lower tier ministry. I think it's been given a bit of a middle tier treatment by the latest government with who they put in it, but it's still not a middle or an upper tier ministry. I think that if we were all to talk about is university and college and technical institutes and advancement, is that important? I think if I were to ask for a show of hands, I think I'd probably see a fair number of them.
I think there's critical, there's important, and there's things we may be able to do without. And sports probably falls into that latter category.
I don't think
finances
so.
at the
with
top.
Disabilities are
A lot of people with disabilities.
And hold on, because sports, Kent Hare is a good choice for this.
Sports
because Calgary is going to bid for the Olympics.
Well,
this is
please don't.
I agree.
Can we not spend billions of dollars?
Oh my God! The Wet Blanket Party is against the Olympics.
We'll get into the that at a later pod. Keep our land. But I think the thing is that the idea of junior ministries where you cut your teeth is a little offensive to some people. And I think that's fair to say. I also think it's fair to say that there are ministries that, like you say, transportation is a vitally important ministry that does way more than disability does. Now, that being said, disability is life or death for people, legitimately. And so that's still a super important ministry.
Yeah, and the disabilities side's definitely, I think, more critical than the sports side of that ministry.
Well, and I think a mistake Trudeau made, potentially, was to sort of break every position into a full ministry. Yeah. Because one of the things when he became Prime Minister was no one's a sort of parliamentary, there weren't...
Ministers of State.
Ministers of State, that was the position. Sort of these sub-ministries, which were, important bits, but were subservient to a certain broader category, however you want to frame it. And there are sort of the big headings of what government does and what we pay attention to. You know, we pay attention to finance, we pay attention to infrastructure, we pay attention to a couple other things, foreign affairs, for example. But under each of those, there are different things that people do. And how Trudeau went, he was like, well, I want to make sure there's equal number of men and women, and I want to make sure, he kind of tried to flatten it. But in flattening it, you kind of go, well, there's things people will pay attention to. And by people, I mean sort of the broad public, you know, the media will pay attention to. And, you know, what they do in sports and people with disabilities, I pay a lot of attention to when I'm at my job that involves people with disabilities at the Cerebral Palsy Association. But other agencies, I'll pay no attention to. And that sort of varies. So it is a junior ministry in some sense, in that it used to be sort of under someone else, and it sort of belongs sort of maybe under the Ministry of Health, Minister of Culture, those two kind of things. And his sort of flattening misrepresents like what the media attention will be.
So I had a boss some time ago who thought we should just get rid of all the ministers and have a ministry of money in, a ministry of money out, a ministry of crown responsibilities, and the premier. So
this is the most like, this is the very conservative end of the BC Liberals, right?
yes.
This is just how it works. Money come in, money go out.
So like things
Scrooge McDuck theory of government.
Things like
I swim in my currency.
That's why we have a $2.7 billion surplus. Actually, that was the plan. If they'd won re-election.
No, once the debt's paid off.
Oh yeah.
The reason we have a surplus is because like the coins
Because
have
you-
enough air in them that we can swim through. Life
Sorry.
is like a hurricane.
So, we should get to
We got
the
really
conservative.
conservative.
We should get to the conservative things. at
Absurd
some point.
ministries. Go for it.
Okay, so I'm like there is like the crown. This actually divides the crown responsibility part away from the money out part of Indigenous affairs, because there is a nation to nation part of this, and that there is a provision of services part, like health and education and human resources and skills development, as opposed to the money in ministries like fisheries and forestry and agriculture and
Petroleum products.
yeah, petroleum. The ministry.
No. I prefer to call it digging things out of the ground and burning it.
Well, okay, so I'm just going to go with, as a closer to this, the most absurd ministry that has ever existed in BC's history, the Ministry of Energy and Mines and Natural Gas and Housing and Liquor and Gaming and Housing. And now he's leader of the opposition.
But yes, ministerial portfolios are fairly weird and arbitrary, is what it comes down to.
But let's talk about the shadow ministers.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
what I was gonna
Speaking
jump
of
to.
weird and arbitrary,
I feel like we've spent
We've spent tens of minutes on it,
Trudeau.
which is the equivalent to the number of followers we have.
Yeah.
You should listen to Podkeeper on that.
So, I'm less interested personally in like who got what in Andrew Scheer's shadow cabinet than in the sort of like intra-party politics of like so-and-so was a former leader
Yeah,
or leadership candidate,
Yeah,
let's say.
which house is rising and falling within the
Yeah.
party? Like which philosophical
It's the Game of
wing?
Thrones. It's the Game of Conservative
Lannisters
Thrones.
and the,
They're calling their bannermen. I understand.
So, we saw, I think Lisa Raitt got a pretty prominent initial position in their first round of announcements, but now in the Who Gets Shadow cabinet, Bernier was apparently really wanting finance. He
had publicly said he wanted.
Which is
it.
a terrible
Which
thing
is-
to do.
No,
If you actually
never
want a
have.
He
portfolio.
not even just like implied he wanted it. He literally told a reporter, "I would like finance."
Not
Yeah,
done.
it would be one thing if he said, I want to focus on the fiscal issues or something like that, which, everyone knows what he's talking about, but he didn't outright say, I want finance. But he actually outright said, I want
it's
finance.
a faux pas because Max Bernier does not follow politics as usual.
Like if I were leader and someone asked for the thing, I feel like I couldn't give it to them.
Because it would look like it was favoritism.
Or,
So he
or
didn't get it.
capitulating
Yeah.
to a
Well, and he didn't get it for a number of reasons. Yeah.
Well, he has this hyper-libertarian viewpoint,
Yeah.
and he also ran on the abolish supply management, which Scheer ran on the exact opposite of save supply management. Everyone should have to pay $3 more on milk than Americans do.
I just love how supply management is like a truly non-partisan issue because there are people who are
Matthew,
absolutely.
can you please explain in 5 seconds or less what supply management is?
Supply management is the government telling the agricultural producers how much they can produce and then buying it all.
All right.
Wow.
So
All right.
it's price fixing. Faster. Bernier was given innovation, science, and economic development, and has also pledged not to bitch about supply management anymore, which seems like, considering he was the leading Conservative candidate until the final round when he lost. And what was fantastic for me personally, because I'm not a Conservative, was being in Alberta at my dad's 60th birthday, surrounded by Conservatives, because it was my dad's 60th birthday. So I had all his friends and rural Albertan in-laws and friends of family being like, have you checked who's winning the race? Because
because you can check.
Because I kept hitting refresh on my phone to find out. And they were like, oh, Bernier's still in the lead. That's okay. They were all actually pretty excited for Bernier to win. And then they were kind of surprised. They weren't dairy farmers.
He may have still won. They did delete all the ballots 8 hours later.
It was surprisingly weird.
Yeah.
Did anyone go back and check the tape they had of the ballot room?
It was not allowed.
So, Patrick, conspiracy.
My tinfoil hat is firmly placed.
Conspiracy theory. Anyway, they were very excited that Bernier was leading and kind of oh, who's Scheer? When he won. Which is weird because Scheer was the Prairie candidate. Anyway, Bernier's now innovation, science, economic development. Chong was given infrastructure, communities, and urban affairs.
Which is probably a pretty smart choice. You can't put him in environment because his main message was very much opposed to what the current leader is. But he does well in urban areas.
That was a good decision.
Yeah.
Steve Blaney, I think, was also running for candidate.
Yes.
Leadership. Yes.
Yeah.
He got veteran affairs. It's hard to remember all 14, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, Blaney got veteran affairs, which is kind of a...
It's a softball. He's going to get to yell a lot.
Aaron O'Toole got foreign affairs.
That actually rounds out Aaron O'Toole. Aaron O'Toole is a bit of a spiritual successor to Andrew Scheer, and giving him veteran affairs rounds him out a little bit. It also is really rewards the Atlantic Canada area because they have a lot of veterans because they don't have a lot of economy.
Although O'Toole, I believe, is an Ontario MP.
Is he?
He is an Ontario
Oh man,
MP.
I swore he was at
No. He went to Dalhousie.
Yeah,
he went to Dalhousie.
Yeah, he went to Dalhousie and was posted to Greenwood. So he spent a lot of time in the Maritimes.
Okay,
but
there we go.
He is an Ontario MP, but I Foreign Affairs is a good spot for him.
And also, he seems to have a bit of a head on his shoulders, and so I admire that. I also appreciate Bernier saying that he's going to shut up about supply management because we are in the midst of a very, very complicated and treacherous NAFTA renegotiation. Aside from the absolutely repulsive thing that Scheer was doing with Rempel and Kent down in the States, bad-mouthing their own country, this is an opportunity for the Conservative Party to glimmer with patriotism by not undermining their trade agenda for their own nation.
I'll give full credit to the Conservatives for giving Scott Reid democratic institutions because during the Electoral Reform Committee hearings, he proved himself over and over again to be fully open to actually looking at he proved himself to be more open to looking at electoral reform than Justin Trudeau is apparently. So full credit to Scott Reid. Glad to see he still gets to shout at the wind, scream at the wind. I
think it buys him some credibility. So.
Yeah. And the most controversial of all of the appointments here
Are we going
is
with it?
finance, where Pierre Poilievre was given the credit position.
Can I ask everybody listening right now, can you please Google image search Pierre Poilievre and the word polo? Because he went to no less than 20 or 30 Government of Canada funding announcements wearing a blue polo that had the Conservative Party of Canada logo on it to announce that he was giving money on behalf of from taxpayers, Government of Canada money, to different infrastructure projects over the course of the year leading up to the election. That is, if not one of the most brazen acts of contempt for government money that has ever occurred in Canadian history. I cannot understate how bad that was.
This is, I think, by far the most partisan take of the lot here.
Yeah, he also has atrocious choice in hair. His haircut is brilliantly bad.
I just Googled imaged it. Yeah, you're right, 100%.
Oh, it's bad. Pierre Poilievre, if you want to look up on video his House of Commons statements, they are atrocious as well. This is a man who has made his politics out of the politics of hating the other guy. The classic Republican trope of, I don't care what I'm going to do when I get into power, as long as I hate the other guy. That is this man.
So do you think that's strategic on the part of the leader? Does he want to point out the federal Liberals' weakness in terms of finance? Is that where they're going to try and get some ground?
I don't know, because the thing is, I'm not sure Pierre Poilievre knows how the government's budget works, despite having been in government for 10 years.
I think there's a good chance he doesn't,
Minister
but
of National Revenue at one point?
Yes, he was, but I don't know if he knew how it worked.
I think this is a sign that they're planning on swinging hard and in a very partisan manner on the finance issues, and I don't know how well it's actually going to play.
It looks... Everything about the sheer government, and you've been complaining a lot about it there, Matthew, and I'm pointing at you, is that it looks like on every count, they're going very hard right against this government.
Although not so hard right that they would have given Kelly Leitch a slot. She was one of the notable...
She self-immolated.
So, Andrew Scheer, there are two takeaways that I have from this. One is that Andrew Scheer is assembling his team of weasels. And... two is that they have decided to run the same playbook from the last election again, which is like economic conservatism, steady hand at the tiller, even though they're not at the tiller anymore, and also just a tiny bit of cultural conservatism. Which I know that's a term that's somewhere around.
When I think of Pierre Poilievre and finance, I do not think steady hand at the tiller. Is he really the right choice for that?
No, he's a terrible choice.
He's like the attack dog. This is the thing, is that like Andrew Scheer is running a model parliament party and not a national opposition.
Woof. Can we describe model parliament in 5 seconds or less? Because several of us have done it and none of us want to revisit it.
So imagine question period, but all the time.
Well, well done.
That
was pretty good. With 19-year-olds, that's well done. So the next one I think is that we were thinking of talking about was there's no Kelly Leitch, like you guys said, or Brad Trost, which means that...
But Brad Trost, I am seeing, and Campaign Life Coalition, is pretty happy.
Wait, what?
Okay.
Yeah, this came up on National Post earlier today. They're fully endorsing Scheer's team. I guess maybe that's just in comparison.
Oh, so Brad Trost's supporters?
Yeah,
okay.
Are happier with the Scheer et al. Versus
so
the
Brad
Liberals
Trost, Brad Trost ran on a blatantly pro-life campaign, a very pro-family values campaign. By the way, family values obviously being code for hating gay people.
Well, one of the big things coming out, especially out of left-wing groups like Press Progress, is the status of women critic, and I can't pull her name up. I'm assuming they gave it to a woman because they're not.
They did.
Do you
But
remember?
before we leave this, like you had something to say about Brad Trost, or
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
sorry.
so I think there's a couple things happening here with leaving Brad Trost, who was 4th place in the leadership race, and Kelly Leitch, who was 6th place. So they did quite well. amongst the many people who are in that leadership race, out of cabinet, and they're now sitting as backbenchers. It says something about Andrew Scheer sort of drawing a line in terms of what is going to be acceptable discourse when it comes to their social conservative values that they're going to be talking about, and what is not acceptable, or at least is not going to be, part of their core messaging. So that's part of what's going on. The other part of what's going on is it lets Leach and Trost say more of what they have a tendency to say, which leans more towards the racist and the homophobic and the anti-choice. So it gives them a little bit more freedom, right?
As backbenchers, they can say whatever the hell they want.
More freedom, but less volume.
Yeah,
and potentially even more freedom than Stephen Harper allowed, which was very little and only when it didn't matter.
Yeah.
It seemed to be like, oh, you brought forward a private member's bill that has no chance in hell of passing because I have all the controls of that. That lets your anti-choicers be happy. The one thing that's come out, though, is the Status of Women critic is Rachel Harder, who's
Lethbridge.
Lethbridge MP, first elected in 2015, who's basically spent her life, it sounds
anti-abortion stuff.
Throwing money at anti-choice groups. So
But I mean, this is in keeping with what we've seen from Scheer. Scheer has decided that the cultural war needs to continue because millennials will never vote, in his mind, and old people will always vote. And eventually that will maybe not work, but for now it will work. And I think that's in keeping with his entire portfolio.
It's so ludicrous to me because it seems like they've decided to fight the last campaign as if it won.
Well, but the thing is, I said something at the very beginning of the leadership race with the Conservatives, and I've said it repeatedly since then, is that race felt like the 2006 Liberal leadership race. In 2006...
Conservative race?
The Conservative... The Conservative leadership race felt like the 2006 Liberal leadership race. Was a bunch of people came out of the woodwork that were former cabinet ministers, former Liberal, former party people that wanted to be the next government. And they thought it'd be a short job. They thought this guy was short term. They thought Canada would grow tired of him. They thought, and it's always a him in Canada because we suck. But they thought that... They
grew tired of her pretty quick. Or
anyways,
the baggage of the party.
They thought that this was going to be a short term in the woodshed, and it didn't end up being that way. And I think that this is a party that thinks that they can fight the last race again. And that was the same thing in 2006 with the Liberal Party when they ran a leadership race with Ken Dryden and Bob Rae and Michael Ignatieff and Stéphane Dion was like some newcomers and a bunch of former cabinet ministers, just like now, is a party that thinks they're going to win again.
I'm sorry, what leadership race hasn't been some newcomers and a bunch of former cabinet ministers? Oh wait, NDP ones.
The most recent BC NDP race. Yeah, the most recent BC NDP race.
The most recent BC NDP race
I think the thing is that what you see is when you have 8 people on a stage in a leadership race or more, you have a party that doesn't know what its identity is. And the Conservatives did not define their identity in that leadership race, nor did the Liberals in 2006 when Dion won out of the blue. And I think that that's going to hold firm, is that the Conservatives still don't know what their identity is, and they don't know what a winning combo is, because they're going to keep running on that same angry, older, affluent, white campaign that they ran on for the last bunch of years.
Right. Yeah. So what we're hearing is that the top 3 issues that they're going to bring forward in the next session is just going to be hammering home this whole point about Omar Khadr and the settlement, the income sprinkling loophole that just got closed, and then the rise in the amount of asylum seekers coming to Canada. And so like you were saying, Patrick, this says to me, not interested in putting forward new ideas or a vision, more interested in maintaining this narrative around, this government is unfair towards so-called ordinary, I'm doing air quotes, Canadians, and with, not so subtle overtones of racism.
Yeah, stock, if you will.
Yeah.
But yeah, I more or less agree they've written off the millennials, and I know a fair number of right-leaning millennials who just see nothing in the sheer Conservative Party. And there is
rightfully so.
Yeah, and there is a version of the Conservative Party that could appeal to a decent chunk of millennials, but it's not this Conservative Party.
Well, they recognize where voter trends are, and they recognize that to appeal to young millennial right-wing voters, they have to alienate some of their older voters.
It doesn't even have to be young millennials. The millennials are in their 30s now.
No. The thing is that old people vote in massive numbers.
So, yeah, but the millennial demographic is, in theory, going to be the largest one.
They're afraid to let go.
Yeah.
It's not like people's voter turnout tends to increase as their age goes up.
Yeah, but the other one that we wanted to talk about, though, was also Michelle Rempel.
Yes, speaking of...
We really wanted to get into Michelle Rempel. Michelle Rempel, for those that don't know, Michelle Rempel has long been the moderate voice of the Conservative Party. She's from an urban Calgary riding. She has been a sort of the fashionable, the sensible. She's frequently come out on issues progressively. She has been on the forefront of women's issues for the Conservative Party. And lately, she has come out very anti-immigration. And she was given the immigration critic portfolio.
Which absolutely... Okay, two things on this. The meta thing is that... demographically and like my, upbringing and where I grew up would tend to like lead me to be a little more conservative. The fact that I am gay and grew up in Alberta and was exposed to a lot of reform and progressive conservative opposition to like me being gay was one of the reasons that I decided to be like a Paul Martin-y business style liberal. And I think that Michelle Rempel, who now represents the riding that I grew up in, is like has taken that and expanded the like feelings of uncomfort to like way more people. Michelle Rempel represents a like fairly racially diverse part of Calgary, Edgemont, and Hawkwood, and like all these places that Calgary Nose Hill encompasses are relatively ethnically diverse. They have a large Pakistani population and Chinese population and Vietnamese population, and she has been on Facebook live every day.
She's turned fairly anti-immigrant, which is really interesting because her original shtick was being the progressive member of the party. And I followed her on Twitter for a long time. I really respected her for a long time based on that. And it's really interesting that she was given the immigration portfolio as the shadow cabinet critic, because I think that ends up actually being a sop to the Kelly Leitches, a sop to the Brad Trosts, a support to them saying, hey, we have a young, a vibrant, a really good cabinet minister or a cabinet critic portfolio already given to that. We don't need to give it to Brad Trost or Kelly Leitch.
Play to the worst impulses.
Put for a second though, Kelly Leitch and Brad Trost did sort of take different angles because Kelly Leitch is
she
sort
hates
of,
him.
Yeah.
And so does Brad. So does
they're in a
Scheer.
weird Kelly Leitch's version of Canadian values does not include Brad Trost for some reason.
Thomas Jefferson said that slavery was like holding a wolf by the ears. You don't want to let go, but you don't want to be holding him by the ears, but you don't want to let go. And I think that the Conservative Party views their Nazi wing of the party, their far right wing of the party, their anti-immigrant wing of the party, the same way. They don't want to let go of that wing of the party because it's a voter base, but they also don't want to be holding on to it, and so they're holding Michelle Rempel in that role for that reason.
There's way too much to unpack in that statement tonight.
Especially as we're passing 11 p.m.
Yeah, we're now coming on to, I think, hour 3 of this, so why not you give us a quick where we can find you, and we'll move on to a Q&A.
You can find Pod Keep Our Land anywhere you find podcasts. You can find us on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We have an email address, I think.
Podkeepourland@gmail.com.
Please give us a listen.
podkeeperland@gmail.com.
We're
We
a
would-
brand new
we would love
podcast. We need some more listeners. We need some
Also-
feedback.
We want
check us out.
to give a big thank you to Politicos to inviting us out here. We understand that our tens of listeners are outstripped by their hundreds of listeners, if not thousands of listeners. And so we were really happy to be part of the 50th anniversary.
And thank you to the audience. This is pretty cool.
Yes,
that this all
it is
came out
really
on a
cool to
Thursday
be up
night.
here.
So.
And that has been Politicos. Find links to the stories we mentioned in the show notes at politicos.ca. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at PoliticosPod. Leave us a review and let us know what you think. Support the show and get early access to our interviews at patreon.com/politicos. And if you have ideas for the show, feel free to send them to us. And just a final reminder, next week we'll be doing our live show at Jaeger's in downtown Vancouver at 7 p.m. Hope to see you there. Thanks for listening.